Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, which is on resilience. Today, you're going to hear from Virginia Middle Miss, Stephanie Moon, and myself. My name is Marie Kinsella. I'm the Director of Community Programs for the Partnership. Virginia Middle Miss is our program manager for our Community Health Worker program, and Stephanie Moon is our Early Childhood Specialist program manager. So we're going to get started right away. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Virginia Middle Miss.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully this is a topical subject for us going on right now. So we're going to have a conversation about resiliency. Next slide, please. Monica, okay, thanks. So how do people deal with difficult events that change their lives? Whether it's a death of a loved one, loss of a job, serious illness, crimes, or other traumatic events, and obviously a pandemic. This has really turned everybody upside down. So many people react with a flood of strong emotions and a sense of uncertainty. Slide. Okay, think about some of the things that have happened to you in your life or with people you know. Slide. How have the recent events affected you or a loved one? And this one is really full of a lot of energy, I'm sure, for everybody as we sit here in our homes doing our virtual presentations. Slide, please. So whether it's a pandemic or not, and even in general, there might be different struggles that everybody is experiencing, whether it's with a family, maybe there's a teen or adult in your life, or you are a teen or a young adult. There might be some issues with social skills. Somebody in your family really has some behavioral problems, or there are some challenges with school or work, health or well-being. Slide. And then certainly you add with what's going on, there's stress that might be coming for families with homeschooling children. Everyone home 24/7. There's no getting away from anybody. If they're all in your house and you're social distancing from the rest of the world, you are with that group. Daycare might be closed. There might be unemployment for some family members or all family members. And there might be people who are at risk, whether it's through their job, whether it's for people that they have to be around that are exposed to the virus. And I know Stephanie wanted to add a little something here for this.
Yes, and in fact, we might just have one of my little visitors join us at some point in this presentation, right? But for most of us with small children or young children at home, we're suddenly juggling multiple roles that we've never done before. I know in our house, we have one in middle school, and we're getting all of her emails and classwork assignments, and then we have one who has special education. So suddenly, not only are we a teacher, but we're a therapist, a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, as well as trying to do our own job throughout the day. So that can be a lot for folks to juggle, and parents, we need to remind ourselves that we're doing the best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Slide, please. So people generally adapt well over time to life-changing situations and stressful conditions. I do believe that that will happen here too, but what enables them to do so? Slide. And that is, of course, resiliency. So we're doing a workshop on resiliency, and there are many out there. I've been kind of poking around and looking to see what information. There's a lot of advice. But I've noticed that it's not one size fits all, and it's very subjective, and there's so many levels to it, and it's so complex. So you can be looking at resiliency from a micro perspective, very small, what's happening in my immediate, the room I'm in, or the macro, and that's where some of us lose our footing a little bit. Slides. So when the collective rug is pulled out from under us, we are all in a state of collective shock. And we can start a conversation around resiliency by giving permission to experience that shock, that it's just okay to be stuck, to be sad, to be frantic. or just to stare off into space. I know that when we started our home, our work from home time was March 16th. It was a Monday. And I feel like the next 6 to 7 weeks, there was this overwhelming energy around denying the shock, not stopping, needing to support our staff, do the best ever, not breathing. It was like this frenetic energy that was just kind of intense, but it's really taken some time to stop and say, wait a minute, it's okay to be stuck here and to feel this kind of rug has been pulled out. Slide, please. So briefly, the goals that we want to try to focus on, or that I want to try to focus on with this presentation, is really understanding the definition of resiliency, learning about the different factors that can lead and support resiliency, and then ways to develop it, metaphors surrounding resiliency, and children and resiliency. Slide. So let's just start off with the definition, which means bouncing back from difficult experiences. And it's an ongoing process. It requires time, effort, and it engages people to take steps or actions. Slide, please. Resiliency is generally thought of as a positive adaptation after a stressful or adverse situation. Obviously, we are in the thick of it, so we're not quite sure of the outcome, but that's what I'm talking about when I say, we would then be looking at it in smaller increments, the micro. Slide. So positive adaptation allows a person to keep balanced. And this is a really important concept. I'm going to be talking a lot about metaphors throughout this presentation. And this, the scale is a useful tool to think of, because if you have a lot of positive factors and support, and you have negative, and I know I've tried to do this before, so you want to make sure that you can have the positive. I think this side is outweighing the negative, and that's really where you're trying the adaptation to come along and balance you within a difficult situation. Slide, please. So research has shown that resiliency is ordinary. It's not extraordinary. People commonly demonstrate resiliency. Obviously 9/11, for those of us who are old enough to remember that, and I can't believe my kids don't actually remember it that well. But then, this is a presentation I do a lot, and I ask, what are other examples? Well, I think we know that COVID-19 is definitely another example, and I'm sure other people can think of additional examples. Slide, please. So I want to show a quick video here that as I said earlier, I've been doing this presentation in one form or another over the years for different groups of people. I have teen groups in different high schools. I do it with transitional housing and shelters, parent groups in pre-Ks and elementary schools. And this video really kind of starts off the conversation around the new normal. Okay, thank you, Monica. So, and that was a film that was created actually for a youth film festival a number of years ago. So it's a teen created piece of work, and I think it really is a testament to the new normal and accepting the change, which may look different or less perfect than what we think it should be, but it is in and of itself, there might be positives and beauty that is to be seen. I think, Stephanie, you likened it to in more of a Japanese culture of the cracked teacup. We were kind of talking about that the other day. And
yes, that in many Japanese homes, cracked pottery or cracked teacups, they are put back together and kept and seen as art because of the cracks and because of how they come back together, that they're now seen as a piece of art rather than something that was broken.
Right. So being resilient does not mean one doesn't experience difficulty or distress. Emotional pain and sadness are common after adversity, and the road to resiliency is likely to involve emotional distress. Slide. The virus is a unifier, yet many of us are in different situations, even though we are all in the same event. And there is a wide range on the spectrum of experience. And I think, Marie, you wanted to mention something on this?
Yes, as I hear about, you parents who are homeschooling and, just doing some wonderful work, but also going through stress with your children, I think about those of us who have adult children. My daughter is in a hospital, which is really always in my mind, but I know that she has some strengths that she uses, and we'll talk about that maybe a little later, to get through it. But, as a mom, there are stresses, and we are all, we're in this thing together, but we're in different boats. And so I just wanted to share that. Yeah.
Slide, please. So resiliency is not a trait that you have or you don't have. And I think that's really important to remember. It involves behaviors, thoughts, and actions that can be learned and can be developed. So you have thoughts, they roll into creating behavior, and then that behavior reinforces the thought or becomes action. Slide, please. So before I jump into giving you tips and working on the toolkit, we want to again acknowledge that there are differences between individual experiences and also individuals themselves. Some tools will resonate and some may not, and that there are underlying factors that may support a toolkit as they support a person. And so we'll focus on those in a minute. And know that the toolkit for any emotional exercise usually starts with self-reflection, with keeping in mind that this is subjective, that this is more of, I wouldn't say esoteric, it's not as small as that, but it is definitely something that's multi-layered, and there's many influencers in how we experience resiliency. Slide, please. So factors in resiliency can be anything from caring and supportive relationships within and outside of the family. Relationships that create love and trust, provide role models, and offer encouragement, reassurance. So if someone has those factors in their lives, they might already have some of that positive that we were talking about on the scale, giving them a little bit of a push towards their resiliency. That doesn't have to be the case. It's not always the case. Slide, please. Additional factors would include the ability to make realistic plans, to take steps to carry them out, a positive view of yourself, and confidence in strengths and abilities. And some of these, I want you to just note, are coming from an executive functioning arena. And so we will focus on that as well in a little bit, but that's key to keep in mind. Slide, please. Factors also can include skills in communication and problem solving, and the ability to manage strong feelings and impulses, that ability to self-regulate, and that's really important too. Slide, please. So all of these are factors that people can develop in themselves. Slide. And again, I want to stress that what works for one situation or person may not work for another. It's a personal journey. And it really, I think this little visual here, the situation occurs, there's a thought about how to handle it, there's an emotion that occurs, and then the behavior is the end result. And so with resiliency, we're hoping to build tools that strengthen that process so that the outcome is positive. Slide, please. Resiliency may reflect cultural differences, and that can impact how one communicates feelings and deals with difficulties. Those differences may connect how one connects with significant others, including extended family members and community resources. And also cultural diversity equals a greater opportunity to access different approaches to building resiliency. Slide, please. The road to resiliency also may include vulnerability, and it's about showing up and being seen even when we're terrified about what might people see or think. I think there are many of us who have suddenly been put into the virtual public speaking arena and are presenting the work that we do, even if it's beloved and something that we do a lot, it's suddenly in a very different sphere. So we're definitely feeling vulnerable, or I am at this moment. And so
you're not alone.
It's not a weakness, and it can be a stepping stone to resiliency. Slide, please. So I want you to consider the following self-reflective questions. And this is really key, as we mentioned in the very beginning, that any kind of work you're doing around an emotional strengthening toolkit, so i.e. Resiliency, you really do need to self-reflect. So what kind of events have been most stressful for me? How have those events typically affected me? And how have I found it helpful to think of important people in my life when I am distressed? Slide. Who do I reach out to when dealing with a traumatic or stressful experience? So that's different than thinking of somebody. You might be thinking of a great aunt who was a mentor, somebody really important to you. She might even be sitting on your shoulder and telling you, whispering in your ear some supportive thoughts. But then who are the people you go to in that moment when you're dealing with a stressful experience? What have I learned about myself and my relationships with others during difficult times? And has it been helpful for me to assist someone else going through a similar experience? And we will focus on that as well in a bit. Slide, please. Have I been able to overcome obstacles? And if so, how? And what has been helpful? What has helped make me feel more hopeful about the future? And then just consider anything else that you have experienced as well. Slide, please. So now we want to focus on something for you to take away. I think with any workshop, if you're coming to, especially at a time like this, you want to be able to walk away and say, I hadn't really considered that before. Or, yeah, I knew those 10 points, but I didn't know about these 2 other things, or I hadn't really thought about how that might affect things. There might be a trigger in a positive way. There might be something that you think, oh, maybe I need to do and look at this differently. So we mentioned the factors, the environment, the history, the starting point of what you may or may not have to work with. But all of that said, we all have the ability to build our toolkit. Slide, please. So again, you want to think about, what do I need? You want to think about it as, how can I develop the tools? How can I maybe, strengthen that set of muscles? Learn a new computer skill or math skill. It's kind of the same cognitive exercise that you would use to do those things. I'm going to go to the gym today. I'm going to get strong. You are developing your resiliency, or you're learning a new language. And I think language actually is quite a good metaphor for resiliency, because you are essentially learning a new language, a new way to do something to kind of help you move through. Slide, please. So again, reflecting on your own internal motivation that gives you drive, judgment of what is important in life, your personal responsibility and accountability. So being able to say, I need to take a half a day, I need to slow down, I need to go take a walk at the middle of, the afternoon to regroup. and being truthful and honest with yourself and with others. And I know, Marie, definitely you want to have some points here.
You know, sometimes I think it's difficult for us to be honest with ourselves when we're grappling with those feelings of maybe feeling insecure, feeling a little scared, you know, saying to ourselves, we shouldn't be feeling this. And in the beginning, Virginia talked about we need to give ourselves permission to feel these things. We need to be honest with ourselves to say, this is a tough time. You know, we can also put that other little voice in that says, but I'm going to get through this. But we have to acknowledge what we're feeling. If we're feeling turmoil or, you know, just afraid and, you know, wondering what the next day is going to look like. Oh, are people going to judge me? You have to go through those feelings. And the best way to do that is to start with that self-awareness and be honest with yourself and say, this is what I'm feeling, and allow yourself to go through it.
Thank you, Marie. Slide, please. So in building the toolkit, now this is by no means the definitive toolkit. 12 ways to build resiliency. I started with 10. I keep adding. Again, it's everybody's list is going to look different, but this is a good starting point and things to think about. Slide, please. So the first is making connections, and how ironic that we are, you know, asked to kind of sever some of those connections. I mean, thankfully, we have the internet. Thankfully, we have the virtual world. In addition to phones and texting and all of those things, you know, it would be a very different story if this had occurred 20 years or 30 years ago. But with that said, good relationships with close family members and friends really is a very important part of your connection. Accepting help and support from those who care and listen to you, and being active. So whatever your group is, whether it's a civic group or faith-based or other local groups, connecting to people that you really have, you have a sense of belonging with. Slide, please. You also want to avoid seeing crises as unsolvable problems. You can't stop highly stressful events from happening. We know that. You can change how you respond to these events, how you are at the effect of them. Look forward to how might the future be different or a little better, and note improvement with your feelings as you deal with difficult situations. So, you know, I'm sure if we all stopped for a second and thought how we were on March 16th, and then maybe how we were on April 1st, kind of, I think it's been a little bit of a up and down, and how we are today, you're dealing with things that overwhelmed you back then, or, you know, yeah, I can do that. I'm fine. I got this. Now here's the next challenge. So it's a pretty, I'd say it's a pretty kind of vivid painting or piece of work for you to actually look at, and you can kind of gauge your own resiliency journey just because there's so much going on for everybody. Slide, please. So accepting that change is a part of living, and some goals need to change as a result, and accepting what cannot be changed helps you focus on what can be changed. You know, the new normal versus the not normal at all. It's adapting to what is going on in front of us. Slide, please. And moving towards your goals. Developing realistic goals, no matter how small. Do something regularly that moves you towards your goal. We were talking about the micro before, so you know, if that's where you are, that's what you do. What's one thing I know I can accomplish today that helps me move in the direction I want to go? And I think both you and Stephanie and Marie, you possibly had comments on this. I know Stephanie does.
I had said to Virginia earlier that, you know, the importance of keeping our goals measurable, small and measurable, right? We want to set ourselves up for success. So I know for me, for example, I am putting on jeans every day because if I did my work in my sweatpants, I wouldn't feel productive. So for me, my goal is if I get out of bed and put jeans on, then I've started my day. And for someone else, it may be that they went for a run or that they ate a healthy breakfast, right? But whatever your goal is, keep it small and measurable so you can feel the success.
You know, and it's interesting that, you know, we're talking about this because for me, when I look back at, you know, March the 16th, I was very challenged when it came to technology. Did not know how to do so many things that through this process, I'm really delighted that I've learned to do. I knew nothing about setting up teams. I knew nothing about doing virtual meetings and really running them and being able to share screens and all of that. And so each day, one of the things that I try to do is get a little more proficient in those areas. And once I'm at a point where I'm comfortable with my technology proficiency, then I'll move on to something else.
Thank you. Slide, please. So taking action, act on difficult situations as much as you can and take real actions then rather than avoiding problems. So, you know, we could be sitting there making lists. We could be thinking about, I send myself a lot of to-do emails, and at the end of the day, maybe I've done half of them. But if I've taken action on some of them, it does set me up for feeling like I'm progressing. And it's that, you know, we're referencing a lot of work-related things, but they're very relatable to just about everything that people have to navigate right now. I mean, going to the store is the same kind of process. It's a 3-hour journey. It's bringing your bags, it's having your mask, it's having your whole process of disinfecting. And so everything has a different level, and it's taking action. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this, and you move forward. Slide, please. So again, returning to self-discovery, you want to look for the opportunity to find ways and places to discover and self-discover. Growth as a result of one's struggle, greater sense of strength, even while feeling vulnerable, an increased sense of self-worth, a more developed spirituality, and a heightened appreciation for life. All of those things are coming from that self-discovery, from taking a minute to just hear the birds, to notice the phases of the moon, to pay attention, and to feel how that is affecting you. I think there was some sharing that was going to happen here. No?
Well, you know, one of the things that I did want to share is that, you know, even in this time of COVID, there are other things that are happening within people's lives that have nothing to do with that. And so looking at those things and how do you get from one point to another? I know for me personally, and not trying to be morbid, but when I experienced the death of my parent for the first time, I was devastated. I just felt like I could not get through another day. But I will tell you, when time came for me to lose, you know, that second parent, I looked back at the things that weren't good for me that might have been happening in my life, the way I may have been isolating. And I realized through that process, I was able to move through the next situation, the same situation, but differently, and really feeling positive and good about how I was able to get through and, you know, and really take advantage of all the things that I had learned going through that first tragedy. So again, I think there are times, you know, this goes back to what Virginia mentioned early, self-reflection. How did I get through that? You know, and how can I take what I got through the last time to get through this time? So I really wanted to bring that up because inside of all of this COVID, there are other things that are happening, you know, that are unexpected for people. And you know, for some people, it's not just about the COVID epidemic.
Right, and that is true. Life is our big picture right now is COVID, and within that sphere, the regular life is continuing. And
Yeah.
so it's an added stressor, but it's all of these tools, these resiliency tools are lifelong, and they are for whatever and wherever you are. So next slide, please. So nurturing a positive view of yourself, developing confidence in your ability to solve problems and to trust your instincts. And then I think likens to what Marie is saying too, and comes from that self-reflection, being able to, you know, listen to the gut, listen to that inner guidance that says, you know, this feels right to me on how to handle this now. I've had the experience of whether it was the loss of a parent or a loved one, or the loss of a job, the loss of what we know, loss in general. And really having that ability to problem solve and trust the instincts on how to get through these things is part of nurturing that positive view of yourself and building your toolkit. Next slide. So keeping things in perspective and in context. Really, really hard to do right now. There is so much going on in the news that we are being bombarded with in terms of, you know, the level of fear and the level of the magnitude. You know, are we never coming out of lockdown ever? That's it. You know, this is big, right? So you can't take it personal, obviously. Consider stressful situations in a broader context in terms of pandemics have happened, and the world has continued and they have ended. There will be another side to this, and keep a long-term perspective from that place and avoid blowing the event out of proportion. That's a good one for general resiliency. I think it's hard for us right now. It's really, really hard. And a lot of it has to do with how much we expose ourselves to that blowing out of proportion information bombardment. So there should be a slide in here for your toolkit on having a very good filter, because that's really what we need right now. So next slide. But we still want to maintain a hopeful outlook on life. And I think this little guy really says it all. The little kids around, we have some, you know, I have some small children in my area, and they're just still so present and so not affected by this in terms of their hopefulness for the world. And so that is something that you can also garner resiliency from. Hope allows you to expect that good things in life will happen and visualize what you want rather than worrying about what you fear. Next slide. So mindfulness, I at first didn't really have this in here because it's, you know, it's used a lot. It's its own workshop in and of itself. It's something that's often associated with stress management. But if you look at it from a physiological standpoint, mindfulness can enhance the prefrontal cortex, which supports executive function. And that is something that we referenced numerous times earlier in terms of that organizing yourself, making a plan, taking action, taking steps, you know, working through problem solving. And those are all skills that, you know, resiliency and mindfulness are often used in the corporate world, in the business world, and that's because of that executive functioning component. But here, it really makes sense. It kind of helps you ground yourself and get a little bit of control to what's going on. Mindfulness helps reset and calm our nervous system. It helps to prevent burnout so we can keep doing the work we do. We're not going to focus on mindfulness skills and exercises here, but they are certainly plentiful for you to tap into. And the next slide, please. So this kind of rolls into taking care of yourself, and mindfulness obviously is one to reduce stress, quiet the mind, And stress reduction, that is a toolkit unto itself. Having, exercise, healthy lifestyle, and self-care. These are all really important. It's kind of a sub toolkit in your bigger toolkit for resiliency. So slide, please. So that was number 11. So number 12, we can go on with the slide. Thank you, Monica. It takes us to assisting others in their time of need, and that can benefit the helper. We referenced it briefly earlier, and the definition, hope equals connection equals empathy, and the definition of empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. So I want to introduce a video now that some of you have probably seen. And it's Brene Brown's work on shame and vulnerability. It comes from that. And it speaks to the use of empathy in the resiliency toolkit. And then we'll talk a little bit about it afterwards. And I think that, that video, that last line always brings tears to my eyes. It's very powerful. Slide, please. I think we can go one more. So just to kind of reiterate, Dr. Brown does a lot of work around shame, and in another context, shame isolates and empathy connects. And that's really the key here. When we talked about connection early on, it was number 1 in our toolkit. And the thought here is that if you're working on building resiliency from a shame of a toxic event or perceived shame, then this is really an important time to remember that empathy and that connection will support and will connect you and kind of move you away from the shame. And I have started kind of even thinking around how does that pertain to COVID specifically, and I do think that there is actually some element of shame around for people who have been diagnosed positive with COVID. There's a perceived shame of, what did I do wrong? Did I not isolate the right way? Did I, and it's something that we need to kind of maybe even put out there, that there is no shame, and we all have the desire to have empathy towards somebody who's struggling, but it's, again, this culture of embattlement and challenge that has occurred around how people are responding to a public health crisis. That is, I think, even creating a little area of shame for some people. And everybody good? I don't know, I couldn't tell if you. Okay.
No, I agree with you. I think that there's some shame and stigma going on, and it's unfortunate because, as Brene Brown mentions, right, empathy is about feeling with and connecting with people rather than the fear pushing us apart.
Right. So additional tools for your strength, to strengthen your resiliency toolkit. And these are kind of your more standard ones, so I wanted to look at them a little more in depth. But journal feelings related to stressful events, kind of thinking of journaling as changing the narrative. There's often a lot of rumination that evolves when somebody is stressed and really stuck in a place. There's that cycle of the same words going over and over. So journaling can help rewrite that narrative and help someone gain a sense of control. Doing meditation and spiritual practices, there's a self-compassion meditation that is often used that's very helpful for some people, and facing fears, really just jumping in and mild modified exposure therapy maybe, but really kind of taking the bull by the horns and going for it. So those are just some examples. Again, it is a personal journey. It's your own journey, and that's very, very important. Slide, please. So also being able to reach out for help when you need it, as we kind of referenced earlier, but sometimes that might look different. That might be self-help or support groups. I know the partnership has a lot of groups that we're putting together around supporting parents, moms. The PPD program is doing different programs. There's a father program that's coming out. And then there's also, more traditional therapy can be done online. Reading stories, memoirs, different tales of people finding resiliency and overcoming challenges. There's just one thing I also wanted to add here, that within that framework, if there's a need to have extreme resiliency that could drive people to unattainable goals, that's where it might be more effective to adjust the goals. That's also where it might be really effective to talk to somebody and get some support if there's like this inability to kind of rein it in. We like to say, work smarter, not harder. So next slide, please. So within this context, the metaphor, which I use the river. There's many out there. Slide, please. Metaphor really can give a sensory experience. It can really be representative of what you are seeing, feeling. Slide, please. So from the context of the river, we can go with the flow at your own pace. You can avoid rocks and branches. When you're tired, you can get out of the boat and rest. To complete the journey, you need to get in and continue to row down the river. I kind of did a quick poke around and like, what other kind of resiliency metaphors might there be? There was one fun one was the plug on the emotional bathtub. I thought that was very good. It gives you some visual on being able to pull the plug or put the plug back in, depending on the water level you want. The willow tree, which Marie will reference later on in a quote, is actually used in a number of cultures in terms of its flexibility. And the mountain is a very traditional metaphor of climbing up a mountain, reaching the high peaks and that kind of thing. Slide, please. So we're going to completely shift gears, or not completely, but we're shifting gears to a different group. We're going to talk about kids and children. Slide, please. So the single most common factor for children to foster resiliency is to have at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. That said, that might not always be the case, but that is a very important factor. Resiliency does not mean that, oh, slide please, yes. Resiliency does not mean that children get over it. It does mean that the caring adults in their lives have a lot of power to buffer rather than cement the effects of toxic stress. And Stephanie, you want to add here?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I know toxic stress is a buzzword in a lot of people's communities right now, and really the definition of toxic stress is strong and frequent prolonged adversity, such as abuse, neglect. A lot of us are hearing a lot about ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, and the effects of ACEs, and that's what we mean by toxic stress, right? There is a balance, there is some good stress, positive, healthy stress in everyone's life, but toxic stress being that prolonged adversity.
Okay, thank you. Slide, please. So these relationships protect children from developmental disruption and provide the responsiveness, buffering and scaffolding, via buffering and scaffolding. Slide, please. And supportive relationships and positive experiences are the building blocks of resiliency. Slide, please. So we referenced early on that scale, that stacking the scale, and children who are resilient to one type of adversity may not be to another, yet positive influences can, put that scale into that weighted down in the positive side, improve resiliency. So again, thinking back to when we talked about this early on, and I did the little balance. Slide, please. we're going to do, I'm going to have 2 videos here. They're both from the Center on the Developing Child from Harvard University, and they kind of really give us a good overview in terms of children and resiliency. All right, so learning, so a child's resiliency factor, again, is supportive adult-child relationships, believing that one can complete a given task and feel in control of that task, providing opportunities to strengthen coping and self-regulating skills, and to use sources of faith and hoping and cultural traditions, and really not a lot of difference between some of the things that we're recommending for adults. Next slide, please. But the focus is really important about learning to cope as a child. So it really develops resiliency. Not all stress is harmful, as Stephanie said. It can be a good way to learn. Opportunities in a child's life to experience manageable stress is really important. And that's something for you know, some communities where there is an over tendency to micromanage and helicopter parent and, you know, make children uber safe and kind of do things for them. It's not really providing them with that learning how to cope with failure. With the help of supportive adults, positive stress can promote growth and it's better able to cope with life's obstacles, both physical and mental over time. Next slide, please. So it's important that to remember that strengthening resiliency can happen at any age, and the brain and the other biological systems are most adaptable in early life, but it is never too late to build resiliency. So that slide, please. Oh, great. Adults who strengthen their own resiliency skills can better model healthy behaviors for their children, improving the resiliency of the next generation. And Stephanie, I know you had you wanted to add here.
Oh, I just was going to mention that, you know, we forget sometimes that kids don't have the same emotional baggage that grown-ups have, and they're often more resilient than we think they are. And a quick example that I had, my daughter was having a birthday during this quarantine time, and I was feeling all this angst that she was going to be missing different experiences. And she said to me, oh, well, I guess I'll have a party in the summer and then we can go to the pool. And so she was able to look at it from a very different perspective because she wasn't carrying all that adult baggage. So we really have to remember that and model for our kids that, you know, these are scary times, but there are lots of people, doctors and scientists working all over the world, and none of us are alone. And if we model that and remember to check our own baggage, I think we'll learn a lot from our kids.
Okay, next slide, please. So it is possible to raise resilient children, to provide them with the tools they need to respond to the challenges of adolescence and young adulthood, and to navigate successfully into adulthood. Slide, please. And so while we cannot prevent adversity and daily stress or pandemics or whatever life is bringing us, we can learn how we think about challenges, and we can change how we think about challenges and adversity. And that's really the key to resiliency. I know, Marie, you had one other story that you wanted to share. I think we missed that window there. But.
Yeah, and that's fine. You know, as we talk about relationships, which are so very, very important, particularly that parent-child relationship. As I mentioned earlier, my daughter is a nurse, something she always wanted to be from the time she was a very, very little girl. And she finds herself now wanting to do, she said, Mommy, I'm in the business of helping people. And the things that I'm seeing every day is counter to that. And so I just want to say, because of the relationship that we've built through the years, you know, she's calling me on a regular basis. I'm texting her on a regular basis. Virginia talked about that empathy and all of that. And so when we look at our children, when I look at my daughter, who I know is going into the belly of the beast every day, you know, because this is what she's drawn to do. And I remember we had a conversation about two weeks ago, and I said, how do you do that? How do you do that day in and day out? She said, well, two things. She said, one, I have you. You know, we talk, you get me through it, and you help me know that things are going to get better. And she said, and the other thing that I do is I make sure that she does take public transportation specifically. She said, so that she can have time to de-stress and be ready for the world. So, you know, for the hospital world. So it's a 10-minute walk from the subway to her hospital. And she said, this gives me the time too. And I think Stephanie and Virginia said it so eloquently. Smell the roses. They used other metaphors, but she said, I'm walking and I'm feeling the air and I'm looking at the sky and I'm looking at the sun and I'm ready. And by the time I get to that door, I'm ready to go in. So again, you know, it's so important to build these relationships, and your child is your child no matter how old they are. You know, so I just really wanted to share that because it's just so important that we can model and help them build their resiliency. And she helped me because I'm feeling like, oh gosh, what can I do? How can I support her? Not knowing that she felt like, hey, your support is getting me through. So which made me feel better. So I think the both of us, you know, we're feeling a little better. And so, yeah, we're connecting. And, you know, and by the way, I have 4 other children. And so we found our niche. And, you know, just really, it's a trying time, but it's also, as you mentioned, Virginia, a time of self-discovery. And I'm discovering things about my children. They're discovering things about me and even my grandchildren. And we're just making this whole thing. Thank you for allowing me to share that story.
Thank you. I'm glad I love that story. So next slide, please. This is just our way of wrapping up. We can, if Monica lets us do questions at the end, we'll try to take a few. But we just have some resiliency words of wisdom, and I think words work as well as metaphors. I think so everybody has their favorite quote that kind of gets them through sometimes dark times. Those are tools as well. You know, just something that reinforces a connection to the universe. So slide, please. So this is one that many people know. Do not judge me by my successes. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. Nelson Mandela. Slide, please. Yeah, just go through them as I read them. Resilient people look at the problem and say, what's the solution? What's this trying to teach me? You will face many defeats in your life, but never let yourself be defeated. Maya Angelou. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. Carl Jung. The oak fought the wind and was broken. The willow bent when it must and survived. Robert Jordan. And someone I once loved gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this too was a gift. Mary Oliver. So on that final slide, we want to thank you for coming to our presentation. And I guess somebody's going to let us know if we have questions or comments.
Yes, I think there are some questions there. You can go ahead and take them.
Okay, so the first question is more of a housekeeping question is, are the slides available for your presentation?
Monica?
We generally do not share slides, but we will have a video of this.
Okay, so a couple of other questions are related to supporting children with special needs. The first question is, do you have resources for children with disabilities for parents at this time in COVID-19?
Absolutely. I'm happy to talk briefly about our Early Childhood Specialist Initiative, which works within our central intake. And each of the early childhood specialists have training in child development, parent-child interaction, child development in general, developmental health, attachment, parenting, things like that. And they can provide some parent coaching right now over the phone to give parents suggestions, ideas, connections to resources, services, connections to early intervention, SPAN, the Special Parent Advocacy Network, as well as activities and developmental screening that parents can do at home with their children with the help of our early childhood specialists. So you can visit the partnership website for more information about that, and we're happy to connect you.
Great, thank you. The second question is also related to children with special needs. So who can you support when you yourself are feeling so empty? And at the same time, how can you nurture kids and special needs kids during social distancing?
That's a great question. It's something I deal with every day, struggle with every day. And in fact, just right before this presentation, when my child with special needs was having a bit of a meltdown, I just had to take her in my arms and we went outside and sat in the sun and we took some deep breaths together, and that helped her calm down and it helped me calm down. And we both just sort of reset together. And sometimes we just have to do that. Other times we need help from outside, and we need to seek professional help, whether that be through telehealth or telemed, through our children's schools, the school psychologist or case manager, or through anybody in private practice, or through an employee assistance program if your organization has something like that, where you can find an outlet to get support and to sort of regroup around coping with your special needs child during this time, because it is an added layer of difficulty, for sure. whoever sent that question, I feel your pain.
That was great. And also, just if the person who sent that question or other people listening to this are looking for those kind of resources, we do have the, Connecting to Central Intake. We have the community health worker program who also connects families to different resources that might support some of the behavioral or special needs programs, and connecting to Stephanie's program, connecting to early intervention, or even just helping parents connect to their school, which in some cases they have felt disconnected from, to get to that case manager and that kind of thing. So
great, thank you. These other questions are all somewhat similar, and they're interested in being able to go back and view the videos that were a part of your presentation, either by sharing a link, or if they're contained within the slides that you'll be sharing, if it's possible to review the videos in that format.
Monica, I think you said you were going to send the links to the videos out. The slides I don't believe are being shared, but the links are going to be to the videos, I believe, are being sent out in an email. Correct me if I'm wrong, Monica?
No, that's correct. There will be a follow-up email to this session that will go out in about an hour after completion, and there are links to all the videos.
And they're all on YouTube. They're all pretty accessible.
Okay, there was several very nice comments about the Brene Brown video and just in general the presentation that you offered today.
Okay, well, I guess, Marie, do you want to wrap up?
I just want to say this is, Virginia, thank you so much. I know that this is a presentation that has helped so many people through the years, and that we've been able to find, through your diligence and commitment to this topic, ways to spread it out to the community, because it's truly important at this time of COVID, that people know that there are things that are available, that they are not alone when they have certain feelings and challenges, and that it's okay. And I think that's the one thing I hope resonates from this presentation, is that it is okay to reach out for help. And really, I just want to thank everybody for, sharing this time together with us. And, I think the three of us wish you well and safe.
Okay.
That's it.